She's like, oh. Why don't you tell her?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Shall I keep going?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome to the Early Learning Board meeting for December. To begin our meeting today, Ka'iolani will share the ELB's mission statement. Ka'iolani?
Aloha kako. The mission is to support children's academic and lifelong well-being by directing and supporting the EOEL for an effective, coordinated, high-quality early learning system from prenatal to kindergarten entry.
Thank you, Thank you, Ka'iolani.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Ka'iolani. We will keep this in mind as we proceed with our work today. There are no announcements. I do need to do a roll call attendance to ensure that we have a quorum. Justina?
Present.
Thank you. Erin?
Present.
Ka'iolani?
I'm here.
Megan?
Here.
Thank you. Ben?
Here.
Meg?
I'm here.
Peters is here. Napua?
Bill here.
Mari?
Here.
Carrie? Carrie? Not here at the moment. Melody?
Here.
Thank you. Dana Luca? Is there anyone here from DHS? Rochelle?
Here.
Steve Schatz?
Here.
Okay. And Matt?
Here.
Thank you. All right, we do definitely have a quorum for today's meeting so that we can proceed to the review and approval of the minutes. Please take a moment to look over the minutes and the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I move to approve. Bob, this is Melody.
Thanks, Melody. Is there a second?
I second. This is May.
Thank you, Meg. The motion has been made and second to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote to approve the minutes. Justina?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Okay, Iolani?
I
Megan?
Right.
Ben?
Aye.
May? May?
Aye.
Thank you. I vote aye. Napua?
I.
Mari?
Aye.
Carrie? Melody?
Approve.
All right. The minutes have from the November 10th meeting have been approved as presented. Thank you all. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for any public comment to be offered at this time. With a reminder that there's a 2-minute time limit and the speakers must address the agenda items. Is there any public comment at the moment? I See no public comment, nothing in the chat. All right, then we will move to item 4, which is the Executive Office on Early Learning Updates. Yuko?
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, good. Sorry, I'm talking and then it mutes me. Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Hi, good afternoon. Kevin, can you please show our slides for me? Okay, as he's pulling those up, I believe the EOEL updates have been sent out previously. So let's go through our updates. So first, let's have legislative updates from Jordana. Next slide, please, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. So for the budget request that we were made that was approved by the board, what was approved by Governor Ige was the 660,000 request for the early childhood educator stipend program, the 2 FTE position counts only. So this was for the business manager and the contract specialist. So again, it was position counts only, no funding needed. And then the $3 million appropriation ceiling for the early learning special fund was also approved. So again, that was just an appropriation ceiling, not a request of funds. The intention behind the budget process was to ensure a steady state budget, not to add new services or expansion. With the transition of the administration, departments will be submitting another budget for the new administration to review that are related to expansion of new programs and other requests that we might have. Once that process is worked out, we will engage with the new administration on that. So we will keep the board posted once we get more information.
Do you have any sense of a timeline? Jordana?
I believe we are anticipating early in the new year.
Would you explain for someone who may not be sure why those 2 FTEs had no funding requested associated with them?
Sure. So we had funds that were already in the base budget. A transfer from line items were approved. So we were able to use the funds for personal services, but did not need to request additional funds for the positions.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. All right, Yuko?
Yeah, perfect. And so while our whole request was not approved yet, these 3 bulleted items are actually really excellent, I would say, gains for our office. So I'm really grateful for these 3 that have been approved at this time. Right now, there are no EOEL public pre-K updates. And then can we move to Alohi?
Aloha, everyone. I just wanted to share that we still don't know about the PDGP 5 renewal award. However, we should find out by the end of the month, and we'll keep the board updated of this notification. They do have to award funds by the 31st, I believe. So they are intending to let states know by the end of this month, if not earlier, if they can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alohi. Next slide, please, Kevin. Okay, and Chris?
Hello, can you hear me all?
Yes,
Okay,
we
great.
can hear you.
These 3 bullets all are referencing the continued staffing issue that not just Head Start, Early Head Start, but childcare programs in general are experiencing, exacerbated by COVID. And so we just wanted to let you know that Head Start and Early Head Start grantees are continuing to work towards full funded enrollment for this school year, which is a requirement of the Federal Office of Head Start this year. And in recognition of changes in the community in terms of resources, staffing issues in the programs, facility shortages, the need to increase compensation to recruit and retain staff. An information memorandum was issued in November by the Federal Office of Head Start to local grantees to provide guidance if they should feel the need to request a reduction in slots for their programming. And so several of our program folks are in communication with their program specialists at Region 9 office regarding the possibility of reducing slots in the future, which is a very unfortunate situation, because these slots are this reduction in slots would be permanent then. So, we're looking at reducing the number of slots for children and families served in order to meet either staffing issues or to be able to compensate our staff with higher wages, et cetera. So it's a pretty challenging time right now. Related to staffing shortages, the Early Childhood Action Strategy Infant Toddler Subcommittee, which Vivian Eto from Action Strategy and I co-chair, have been in communication with HECIA folks about trying to work with Department of Human Services Child Care Program Office to revisit or take a look at what are some flexibilities to enable more folks to qualify as infant toddler caregivers because of the severe staffing shortage. And so we, this past week, met with Child Care Program Office staff, and about 10 of us met, many of whom are on this call today, to just begin to have some preliminary conversations about what are some short-term, intermediate, and long-term strategies that we might be able to implement to address the staffing shortage, specifically for infant toddler caregivers. And so the decision was made that we will be forming a work group to continue to explore possible options and provide recommendations to DHS. So we're really looking forward to having continued conversation about this topic with Dana and her team. Mahalo.
Thank you, Chris. Next slide, please, Kevin. So I wanted to just revisit this visual, which I've shared since I started in this office, and just so that we can pull up just a little bit so that we can see the bigger picture of all things happening. So while we're in the midst of doing a lot of smaller pieces, I just wanted to pull up back again to refocus ourselves on like, what are we really doing so that we can move our vision, mission, and our guiding principles forward. So we continue to learn. I hear some feedback. Okay, so, okay, I'm so sorry, I hear feedback. I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm going to keep talking. So we are continuing to learn and the formulate and the activate. So as we're starting to move forward in our work, we can see that we're touching on each of these purple, yellow, and pink pieces as we continue to do our work. Next slide, please, Kevin. And when I was looking at the vision of impact, so what would this look like? And as I reflect back on my personal goals, my office, and our systemic goals, especially focusing on system and looking at what would achievement look like, that we make progress on our priorities and objectives with urgency, and for change that we remain solution focused with our children in mind. And so I just wanted to reconfirm that we are moving in a positive direction. And next slide, please, Kevin. And I was further encouraged after listening to the inauguration ceremony the other day. Next slide, please. As you can see, Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke really highlighted that she's excited about the work ahead and the promise of what we can accomplish together. And I was very encouraged. Next slide, please, Kevin. By her statement specifically related to the area in which we are supporting. And it says, as a working mother, I know firsthand the importance of access to high quality preschool and childcare. We all want our children to enter kindergarten prepared to succeed, but this urgent need goes beyond educational equity. It's a cost of living issue for many of us who cannot afford steep tuitions for the few coveted preschool slots. And she goes on to talk about how the legislator already provided funding for 2,000 to 4,000 new seats, which is going to get us off to a good start. And I'm very excited that she's focusing on this as it aligns directly with our work. Next slide, please. And when we look at alignment, these are the critical elements that are really going to help to move our system move forward. But this context in the center to me is very important at this time. There is somebody currently in our office who's expressed support for our field that we're focused on. And I think that that's very important. Then when we look at our components of our family support, early intervention, early learning, health, mental health, and nutrition, we're looking at scale, these connections between each of these agencies and providers, the infrastructure. We can see that things are starting to align at this moment. Next slide, please. So focusing on the 4 main areas of their early childhood care and education system, when we look at our early learning, we can see that Act 46 is moving along. We have our target of 50% by 2027, 100% by 2032, and really starting to dialogue and have conversations about how can we all help to lift and reach this goal. So public, private, and partnerships between public and private agencies. Next slide, please, Kevin. In terms of family support, I wanted to say thank you to the Department of Human Services for inviting me into a National Governors Association conversation, which is really focused on expanding access and affordability to childcare for student parents and ensuring quality training pathways for early childhood educators. This is the first conversation I had ever been a part of, but I was grateful for the invite from the Department of Human Services so that we can really start to talk about family support, this one type of family support. Next slide, please, Kevin. And in the realm of special needs, early intervention, and also health, mental health, and nutrition. Next slide, please. I'm very grateful to be a part of Department of Health's hearing and vision screenings and testings. And we had our very first vision session on December 2nd, and we're going to have a hearing session on the 9th. And the purpose of this session was to establish protocols for hearing and vision screening that is evidence-based and age-appropriate. And so one of the really neat things that I learned from that session was that the vision screening had begun in 1965 from what was the Department of Social Services, and it was transferred over to then the Department of Health and Education. And so I was grateful for the presentation from Dr. Roger Eid, who's an optometrist, who did a presentation of findings and recommendations of the subcommittee to our group. Next slide, please, Kevin. And in terms of another system update, EOEL is working on a convening with Hawaii Data Collaborative being the facilitator. And the purpose of this is to really address specific data needs and to navigate our data sharing relationships. And it's so that we can ensure that the children and families have access to early care and education, and also the facilities to support this growth and their development. So here are some things that EOEL is currently working on in terms of the early learning system, family support, special needs, early intervention, health, mental health, nutrition, and also the greater early childhood care and education system. Thank you, Kevin. You can stop sharing now. And does anybody have any questions for me at this time?
Anything in the chat?
I think I see Justina's hand up.
Justina does have a question.
Yes, I apologize though, because I did it the wrong way. I know we're supposed to use chat to indicate we have a question. So Yuko, this may be a question for you or Jordana, but I was hoping you guys could remind us with the 3 legislative items that were approved, which is really good news. I was glad to see those 3. What are the things that are still pending that you'll find out about in the future? Because I just couldn't quite recall what else was in there that was the request from EOEL.
Jordana, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So funding for the 23 new classrooms was our biggest request. Funding to expand FCIL programs, ELB's requests. So all of ELB's requests, which I believe included Lane's position, the institutional analyst position, and funding for systems building work for the board.
if you.
Yeah, I think those were.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions? For Yuko or members of the staff who presented? I don't see anything. No. All right, Yuko, thank you, and thank you to the staff for the updates. We'll move now to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the first of the subcommittee reports. And the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee, as you know, was coming back at this meeting to receive approval after some discussion, presentation around the Act 46 roadmap. I'm going to ask Ben if he would take over this portion of the meeting.
Thanks, Bob. So Keiko and I are gonna lead the discussion, the presentation discussion of the SCR, our response, our roadmap for Act 46 and 210. And we took the feedback we got from the last meeting in November, as well as some other feedback that had come in since today's meeting. And Keiko's going to go over those changes, and then we will be focusing on an approval for the 4 action items that are summarized in the executive summary. And I'll go through that when I make my motion, and then we'll have a discussion after I make the motion. So let's start with Keiko, if you can go through the changes that we made since the last meeting.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. So yes, we had was a nice discussion in November, so thank you. There were about 5 different areas that we needed to address. And then since then, like Ben was saying, we did get some comments from Aaron and others, so we want to be able to address that. So in total, we have about 6 different areas that we'll be addressing. The first area was the question that I think May brought up about the data. So it was a little bit confusing. So what we did was we added a table in the beginning of the document. So if you look on page 2 on the chart, they have the document that shares about the number of children that we're talking about. And we did it with a minimum range all the way up to a maximum range. So that includes the number of children that are expected to be served. And then the number of kids, children 3s and 4s that will not be, that would be expected to be unserved. And then we also looked at the number of seats or the spaces. And then from there, we took, I think Lane was able to do a calculation, a rough calculation of dividing the seats by 20 so that we would come up with the number of classrooms that would be needed. And then the number of staff that would be expected. And it was really just talking about the teachers and the teachers' aides. So that data we spelled out for you. We did put, like you had suggested, a minimum and a maximum range there. We did not include the other data from the other reports, such as the Kamehameha report. The Kauai report is included as an attachment. We did not all have access to the Blue Sky report. And so there was other reports that are forthcoming, but we just weren't able to include at the time. So you won't see a range from the other reports, but as a subcommittee, we did go through and our projections fall along those similar lines. I think we're in line with what others have been sharing. So that's in terms of the data. There was a question about the Head Start data and whether that was included in the patch numbers that was reported. And yes, the numbers are included. The Head Start data is included in that. So what we did was we made sure that we updated, or Lane updated the roadmap to include that double count of the Head Start that we had originally. So we took out that double count. So from there, you'll see that now our data shows that we're talking about 565 to 719 classrooms. Again, that's based on the number 20 children per classroom. And then again, we had the number of children that were accounted for that. So we did adjust those numbers based on some of the concerns that people had shared about the Head Start data. And again, the data that the number of children that Lane pulled from was he took the Department of Health's vital records and look at the birth data, but then he also adjusted for the cohorts. So again, going back to the Department of Education's cohorts for the numbers of 3s, 4s, and possibly 5s before they turn 5 before the age of before the date of July 31st. So that's how come you have the different data in terms of the number of children that we're talking about. And all of that is spelled out in the different tables. So again, we referenced it by putting the tables that you'll be able to find the information there. So again, the first area was the data. The second area was the other reports. So again, thank you all for sharing your reports. And again, we included the Kauai one as an attachment. The other area of concern was that 20% of families who may choose not to send their children to preschool or to have a 3 or 4 year program. And then again, in checking with some of the EOEL staff, the way the act is written, it implies that we have to offer slots for 100% of the children, not necessarily whether the 20% of parents choose or not choose to enroll, but we have to be able to offer that 100% of the slots. So Dr. Mar, your question about the 20% of families, yes, we understand that there are some families who choose not to send their child to a program, but again, the legislation is talking about the 100% of children that we're talking about. We did add attachments. The first one was the engagement, the Act 46 engagement feedback. So this is when the Executive Office on Early Learning and Department of Human Services, they did a nice job of talking to providers, both center-based as well as family child care providers. So we included that attachment in the report. It was nice because a lot of the concerns are the same concerns that we addressed. So there was good similarities and alignment there. The second attachment was a Kauai Early Childhood Care and Education report. That was a 2017 report. And then the third attachment, other people such as Erin and others had talked about mapping. So we did include the Center on the Family's access to early childhood care and education in Hawaii. So that's based on the Center on the Family's reports. We included it as an attachment, but it's also in the document itself. The fifth area was a request from Justina to come up with a visual, and Justina, the subcommittee went back and forth on this because the 4 areas that we're talking about in our recommendations are around the areas of workforce, facilities, funding for the mixed delivery, and the quality. So those are the 4 areas that we're requesting or that we're including as recommendations. We couldn't quite come up with a visual in time for this because, again, there were some conversations on what came first. So we didn't want to make it seem like it had to be in a certain order. We really hadn't had that larger discussion with the subcommittee and with the early learning board. So for example, what comes first? Is it the funding? Is it the facilities? Is it the workforce? We all know all of them are important. And we also address that quality needs to be in all those areas. But again, we couldn't come up with a visual. So I apologize, Justina, we couldn't come up with that. But again, we tried to list everything in the executive summary, as well as with the table that had the data. And then we started right into the actual recommendations in those 4 areas. And then we'll be discussing those 4 areas later today. And then the final area was we had great written comments from Erin. So Erin, thank you. We really appreciate the time it took to share your concerns. And you did a great job of addressing some of the infrastructure needs that we need to be addressing. We did take as many of the considerations and your comments into the report. So you'll see that there is the geographic maps, and we appreciate the concern that you have for DHS capacity for licensing as we're going to be increasing. So those are the other areas that we will need to be addressed, as well as some of the, including, we talked about just the teachers and the teachers' aides, but we also recognize that directors are going to be needed. And then also in terms of supports, sometimes it's not just the workforce compensation, but that there could be other supports that are needed, such as like the mental health supports or other pieces there. So those are the other areas, and I think that came up in the RAND report as well. So we weren't able to include it in the report itself, but we did put those into consideration. So again, great comments from our November meeting. We did try to include all of the recommendations and suggestions that folks shared with us, so we appreciate that. And then we did try to include as much as we can in terms of some of the recommendations. So you'll see those revisions in the document itself. I'm not sure if there are any questions, or Ben, if you wanted to jump back into the recommendations themselves.
Yeah, I think what I'm gonna do, Keiko, is one of the things that our subcommittee had talked about and we've discussed with Bob is the approval of this roadmap and really focusing in on the 4 action items, mainly the legislative approaches, because that's the ask that we're proposing. Also understanding that this is an iterative process, so as of like today's meeting, this is where we're at. If we get the approval, which I'm crossing my fingers for today, there might be a little bit more work as far as looking at some editorial things and not changing the content of what's in here, but more editorial things just to kind of prepare it for an official submittal to the legislators. And that we anticipate over the next year, probably next year or even the following years, to possibly do some amendments to it or possibly look at changes that need to be made depending on what kind of happens with the current the new administration that's going to be coming in, as well as other legislation that may be coming through over the next year. So again, I think the draft that we have is good and it contains the information that we know as of present day, and our roadmap informs the legislature. These are the things that we feel you should be looking at and approaches you should be looking at as far as legislation and whatnot. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I'm going to make a motion, and then Bob will I'll make the motion, we'll get a second, and then we'll go into discussion. And during the discussion, Bob, I hope I'm not messing up this process, but I just kind of want to be transparent. During the discussion, we're going to take your feedback and comments. It might not make it into the final draft, but definitely the SI committee will use it, as I said, as we move forward over the next year. And if there's things that we need to issue as a supplement possibly to this roadmap. Okay. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay. Okay, so I want to make a motion to approve the content. I want to make a motion to approve the 4 action items contained in the revised draft report to the legislature, this roadmap that is summarized in the executive summary.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Is that Megan?
Sorry, this is Megan.
Yeah, thank you. All right, the motion's been made and seconded to approve the 4 action items contained in the revised draft report for the legislature and presented in the executive summary portion of the report. Is there any discussion?
Is there a need for me to go through some highlights of those 4 areas? We haven't changed much except for the items that Keiko had talked about. So there, in the legislative approaches, it's very minimal changes since the last draft.
And I think it might be helpful if you just highlighted some of the key pieces of each one.
Okay. Kevin, do you mind sharing the file I gave you and go to the, I think it's page 3 of the document. Next page. Okay, so yeah, so the first action item is around addressing the workforce, and we have 5 legislative approaches to consider. The first is to support the state of Hawaii legislature legislative appropriations to increase the base budget allocations to reflect on ongoing maintenance of efforts connected to early childhood care and learning programs and initiatives embedded within the state of Hawaii programs and state of Hawaii budget program IDs. I don't know if I'm going to go through all of them. Maybe I'll pick a couple, and you guys can all read through them. I guess I'll go with the last two. Is one of the things we talked about was implementing a state of Hawaii refundable income or business tax credit for early learning providers and or their employees. And then lastly is to support the funding for the ECE stipend program implemented consistent with the HRS 30209. Any questions on any of the five approaches we have here?
Justina has a question.
Yeah, mine's sort of a question and a comment, and it's a few places in the draft. First I want to say I actually think this draft is so great. I hope we do get to approval today, like just the way you guys have laid out the tables. I think it's really clear, and I hope that we get lots of eyes reading this document. I think the one that sort of stood out to me is the one that's released on your screen. It's number 2, the amendments for the permanent exemptions for standards and assessments around Hawaiian language medium. There's a couple other references to that. And my wondering is whether or not there's a way that it could also be framed in like what we could support in terms of kind of meeting those qualifications and standards that is currently used, or maybe something that's in development. Because I think the way this reads is trending, or it sort of trends towards having I guess it's that language around the permanent exemption, and trying to figure out if that's what we intend long term, or if there's something, because it doesn't exist now, that it's going to be in development in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Justina. I think we've had extensive conversations around this, and Kaiulani has provided our group, SI committee, with a lot of information around Hawaiian language medium and the goal of the program. And I'm not sure if Kaiulani, if you want to interject, but this is something that we looked at hard how to word it, and I think this is the. What happened? Okay. Oh, I'll continue. Kaiulani, I'm not sure if you want to chime in, or.
Yeah, I can chime in really quickly. Mahalo, Justina, for the question. And I think that the working group that we had on this subcommittee really allowed for the opportunity for us to dive deeper into those issues and why, for the Hawaiian medium community, why it's important for it to stay that way. Just really briefly, and I guess more broadly, Hawaiian language medium programs were set up to revitalize Hawaiian language. And since the beginning of the initiatives, which was 40 years ago, we need things like this in order for us to be able to provide access to programming, because we do not have human resources, physical curriculum resources or anything of the sorts that is available to most mainstream languages. And so the reason for the exemptions, and it's really to allow us to be able to keep the momentum and not be subject to certain restrictions that would force us to not be able to provide the programs. For the workforce, for example, it could be something as simple as not having enough staff who are proficient enough in the language that also meet certain qualifications. Likewise, for assessments, most of our children, maybe not most at this point, maybe about half and half, speak Hawaiian language at home and speak English at home. So we're just faced with different incoming levels that our assessments need to be a little more flexible than those of other programs. And again, going back to even the resourcing of the assessments, the tools, and the ways in which they're administered, we're very strapped when compared to any other mainstream program.
That definitely helps as an explanation. I think the piece that I'm curious about, and it makes a lot of sense for short term, and my wondering is like, would we, and we would hope, right, that that changes for future, that there is more resources available, that there is more Hawaiian language immersion teachers that are fluent and available. And so I guess I wonder, is it a permanent exemption, or is it one that's just an exemption for some period of time? And I don't know what that period of time is.
I think it is permanent because of the state of the language. And like I said, it's been 40 years and we're still in the place that we need those exemptions. So in order to best protect the language, I would suggest that we leave it as permanent exemptions. If one day, who knows how long that would be, that we, are able to build the resources, build capacity to create these things that are fitting to the programs from within the communities that are, providing the programs, that would be great. But at this point, I think any sort of change to language could be detrimental to Hawaiian language.
Thanks, Kailani. Thanks, Justina. And the point, we understand where you're coming from because we had pretty extensive conversations around it, and it's something we leaned on Kailani, and the group felt this was probably the best way at this point in time, the best way to kind of put it down as part of the roadmap. And of course, like Kailani had said, down the road, if things change, things progress, it could look differently. Okay, I'm gonna move to action. If there's no other questions, okay, I'm gonna move to action item 2. So if you could scroll down a little bit, Kevin, there's 5 legislative approaches to consider here. I'll just highlight 2. I'll just pick 2 to highlight. The second one is to support the state of Hawaii legislative appropriations to expand ELB public pre-K facility requests in the future during the upcoming and future fiscal biennium. And then support, the last is to support state of Hawaii legislative appropriations similar to that was made in Act 257. And so we have things in here that is related to SFA as well too in the larger report, the larger roadmap. But as far as the legislative approaches, these are the 5 that we're walking away with for the roadmap. Any questions, comments? See anything? Okay, I'm going to move to action item number 3, which is around funding. And obviously, this is a big area that we wanted to provide some considerations to the legislature. And so there's we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different ones, and there's a lot. It ranges in a lot of different funding areas around early care and education mixed delivery system. We have the third one there is to support continued funding for SFA development of EC facilities in the state's biennium budget process. We understand that's all of these are equally important. Also, the 5th one is around adjusting childcare subsidy amounts administered by the state of Hawaii through CCDF and POD programs. For example, to ensure that eligible families pay no more than 7% of their OHANA income, which is something that I believe, Aaron, you brought up in some of your comments. So there's just 2 of the 7. Anybody have questions, comments, feedback that we can take? No, okay.
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. And the last one is addressing program quality improvement and maintenance. And, we came up with two here. The first is to appropriate funds to DHS to support and sustain accreditation of ECE environments in the state of Hawaii in the immediate and near future. We know that's an important piece for providers to meet the accreditation is that funding piece to be able to support that effort. And then amend provisions. This is similar to what we talked about earlier with the Hawaiian medium exemptions there. So we have it in kind of two areas. It kind of hits two pieces of our action items. Any questions, comments, feedback?
I don't see anything, Ben, so we move forward to take a vote. Since motion has been made, seconded, and discussion has been allowed. Voting to support the SCR 217 report for action items contained in this revised draft and summarized in the executive summary section of the report. Justina?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Okay, Yolani?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
May?
Aye.
I vote aye. Nakua?
Aye.
Mari?
Aye.
Carrie? Carrie is definitely not with us. Melody?
Aye.
The motion has passed and the 4 action items from the Act 46 roadmap as part of the SCR 217 report have been approved. I want to thank Ben and Keiko particularly for taking the lead on this effort, for Lane for the extraordinary energy of putting it all together and taking our voices and collectively expressing them. And for the committee members who put in a great deal of time. This was not an easy task. And we know it's not as perfect as we would like it to be, but I want to acknowledge the work of everyone who participated in this. Ben, do you have any final words you wish to say before we move to the next item?
Yeah, Bob, thanks. I just wanted to thank everyone, all the SI committee members for, the valuable input. And we had a lot of, I want to say, good discussions as well as tough discussions in figuring out what we wanted to include in here. And I think what we walked away with is, this is what it is right now. This is not something that's, going to be set in stone forever. There's probably going to be, again, like I mentioned earlier, some supplemental information coming out or possibly even some revisions that'll come out later on, depending on the climate of early learning as it evolves. But this is, for right now, with the information that we have, this is the product we're putting out. So I wanted to thank all the SI committee members. Can we stop sharing screen so I can, sorry, Kevin, thanks. It'll be easy for me to acknowledge everyone. So I wanted to thank Bob, Yuko, going down the list, Keiko, Megan, Kailani, Alohi, Jordana, and I probably will be missing some people, and I apologize. Sherilyn was also part of the effort, and then also Lauren from the DOE. I think I got everyone, but I really appreciate it. And we still got a little bit more work to do because, we want to make sure that final draft is good as far as the edits and whatnot that we have to make. So, but thank you guys for approving it.
Thank you, Ben, for your leadership and bringing this to fruition within the time frame. And we will send a final copy to our board members once it's ready for submission to the legislature. Right, we move to the next subcommittee report, and this is a governance standing subcommittee. There are 2 items that we need to take action on. And I'll turn it over to Matt to lead us through the conversation.
Thanks, Bob. Kevin, can you please share the governance subcommittee Microsoft Word document and go to the second page? Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. If you've not had a chance to review our update to the board, now's a great time. So we, the governance subcommittee, had to come up with recommendations to the board on the particular director leadership standards and indicators that will be used to evaluate Yuko in her new position as our EOEL director. Bob, myself, and Dana met during our regularly scheduled meeting on November 18th, and we went through the current director leadership standards and indicators. If you remember, we crafted those we crafted those when we became a governing board, and they were crafted for the previous director who had already been in the position for several years. So those not all of those particular items would actually, it would not be fair to our new director to evaluate her first year with all of those particular things. So we went through that and decided what would be the specific standards to use, and then come up with some evaluation criteria, specific criteria or objective measures. So what we landed on was three items. Number one is the visionary leadership capacity building of statewide early learning systems from prenatal until K entrance, and then specifically using 1.1 and 1.2. And then under those, in the red, you'll see what we come up with for our criteria and or objective measures. So we feel that evaluation of our EOEL director based on familiarization with and development of relationships with staff, evaluating staff roles and responsibilities, organization relationships and structure, and development of any organizational plans based on those evaluations. Learning how to navigate the attached agency relationship with DOE, that's its own, very particular thing as an attached agency. And so that was a very particular evaluation criteria we thought was important. And then reviewing and becoming familiar with the state plan, the strategic implementation plan, Act 46, Act 210, the school facility authorization, Act 257, and then other strategic priorities of the EOEL. And then finally, developing a basic understanding of the state budget process and ensuring that the budget priorities align with the state plan and the broader system building goals. Then for 1.2, collaborate across the public and private sectors and among public agencies, develop shared objectives and to move system building forward. We came up with 3 criteria and some measures, so familiarization with the early learning landscape. So who are the stakeholders? what are their roles and responsibilities across the system. And basically what we'll use to measure is the director's attendance at conferences, workshops, and meetings, either virtually or in person. Then developing relationships among and across these public and private sector agencies and organizations. Again, actual meetings with agencies, partners, and others. And then any work that the director has done on any of the projects like the different acts, the P2 governance, PDGB5, et cetera. And then finally, collaboration with public and private partners and alignment on shared goals and objectives. And again, any actual work that was done. Then the last thing that we will use for evaluation, can we just scroll down a little bit there, is on number 5, professionalism. So that if you remember that the one-page document that has all the other things, we have filtered down to these 3 items. So I am going to make a motion that these the 3 first-year evaluation items as presented in the governance subcommittee update to the early learning board on December 8th are used as the evaluation items for the new EOEL director.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
This is Ben, I'll second.
Thank
Ben?
you.
Sorry, I couldn't tell who said it. Made and seconded. The floor is open for discussion. Any questions or comments from that? Hearing none, I presume we can move to a vote to approve the first year evaluation items 1.1, 1.2, and 5 for the new ELB director as presented in this document. Justina?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Keilani?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
May?
Aye.
I vote aye. Napua?
Aye.
Mari? She may have had to step out. I'm not sure. Mari? Okay. Is Carrie here? No? Melody?
Aye.
The motion has been approved as presented. Now, thank you for that. And the subcommittee, we want to move to item 2.
Yes, thank you. I was gonna say, Kevin, you can keep that up because we need the first page first, and then we'll go over to the, oh no, I'm sorry. Actually, just you can go right to the, if you bring up the PDF of the draft, the draft report. Yes, that'll work. That'll work. All right, so you guys can read on your own in the governance subcommittee update. We met on November 14th. Myself, Bob Peters, Rochelle Mahoy, Dana Luca, and we had a guest, Ku'ilani La'iha. Thank you very much, Ku'ilani, for joining us. We appreciate your help and input. So the purpose of the special meeting was to develop an action plan for next year to fully respond to SCR 34, which would include a report for the 2024 legislature and any proposed legislation to change the ELB size, composition, term limits, etc. In our discussions, the subcommittee agreed on 3 things. The third resolution requests findings, recommendations related to the development implementation of a 5-year strategic plan for the board. We have no intention at all to convene the ELB to develop a separate strategic plan. So we decided that the EOEL state strategic plan is the Early Learning Board's strategic plan. And then moving forward, we also decided the governing board, if we land on governing board members should have a well-defined role, focused duties, while still keeping an early learning systems perspective. And then while broad representation of early learning partners is desirable, a question to be resolved is whether it is most effective in a governing versus advisory capacity. So to do all that, we decided to create an action plan. So Kevin, if you can scroll to the last page. So what we did is we outlined all of the months of the year and then what we would be doing beginning in January of next year in preparation for submitting a report to the 33rd legislature next year. I think it's 30, or no, this is 32nd part 2, sorry. 32nd legislature part 2 in 2024. There's really, from July to now, there's not enough time to do exactly what they asked us to do and have it be meaningful, plus develop the necessary legislation if necessary. So we decided we need to determine what is the purpose of the ELB and its value. And then given the purpose, what type of board is best suited, representative or governing? Then once the type of board is determined, we have to determine the size and composition of the board, then determine term limits for the board members, and then finally craft legislation to propose this any changes to the 2024 legislative session. So obviously in January, we would be reviewing all those documents that affect us, Act 202, Act 178, plus the HRS. Then our basic action item for January is to outline the board's purpose and value. February, look at some best practices from other states. And then once we've had that purpose and value, what type of board may be best suited. Then in March, review board creation best practices of those particular types, and then decide size and composition of the board. In April and or May, this is where we would be coming to the early learning board with recommendations. We don't know if it will be April or May, it depends on how far we get. But we have to determine board limits, draft subcommittee recommendations for any HRS changes, and then present those to the board in April or May. Come June, we have to begin developing the legislative proposals to change the HRS, and then actually route those to the board, to EOEL and other entities for review and comments. Then in July, as part of the legislative package and proposal process, we need to bring that back to the board for approval. Then actually draft the bill and again, bring that back to the board in August for approval. And then September, we'll be drafting the legislative report. In October, the final draft of the actual legislation will go to the governor's policy team. And then, Kevin, if you could scroll down just a little bit more there. November, we'll come back to you with a draft report, legislative report. finalize any legislative packages, and then December submit the report, and January, February of 2024 begin developing advocacy strategies to support the admin bill if necessary. So we tried very hard to spread it out over the 6 to 7 months of next year, which will then, like I said, allow us to develop the necessary legislation and have all the necessary eyes look at it. The report itself is very short for this year. Kevin, if you just scroll up to the page 2, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just so you can see, we have an introduction. We talk about why we're presenting this report. We provide some background on the Early Learning Board, Early Learning Advisory Board, and then Early Learning Board. Then we talk about, on the next page, our activities, which basically tells the legislators who asked us to do this in SCR 34, sorry, we're not going to provide you a report and proposed legislation this year, but here's our action plan to fully respond in January or the next legislative session. Okay, so all right, now I have to I'm going to make a motion that the board accept the draft report to the legislature, including the timeline, the action plan timeline for submission by the end of this year for the 2023 legislature.
Motion has been made to accept the draft report to the legislature, including the timeline laid out for 2023 and the reporting schedule. Is there a second?
This is May. I second.
Okay, thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Matt and Bob, this is Steve.
Yeah.
So have you had any conversations that give you any indication of how this will be received? Specifically that basically this says not yet, right? I mean, essentially it says we're not quite ready yet.
Bob and I had a discussion about that. That's the great thing about SCRs. They're not required. We actually don't have to do anything. Now, politically, yes, you want to do something, which is what we decided. We can't really address what they want in this small time frame that was available to us. So we're trying to present to the legislators. We did look at this. We plan to fully respond to them, but actually have something very well developed and well thought out for next year.
Yeah, and that's a fair distinction to make, Matt, that it is a reso versus statute. Yeah.
So, reso, you can actually you don't even have to write a report. You can just ignore it. But we felt that was not politically savvy way to go.
Thank you.
But that's a great comment.
If I may chime in also, I've thought about that in terms of what happens today in the approval. Once it's approved, I thought I would take the step of a heads up to the person who designed, the senator who was responsible for this particular FCR.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Just so that folks know there's forward movement.
Yeah. I agreed with Matt that we didn't need permission to go this route, but we needed to make people aware of where we're headed.
So I was, just so folks know, I was in another meeting with a different legislator on a different topic. But the discussion about including a required legislative report as part of this this bill that the legislator wants to bring forward, the legislator said nobody reads those things. Which having, I have five legislative reports that my division is responsible for. Sometimes I know that may actually be true, but then very specifically, other folks will read them because they're the ones who ask. So.
Justina?
It's not a change to the report or anything that would be put in, but in looking at some of the milestones, my head was definitely going around. Right now, because Early Learning Board is made up of a broad representation of the early childhood community. I guess I was thinking about the points in time with those milestones that we would need to be going back to our constituent groups and other things. So it looks like there's sort of enough time in this timeline to do it, but it also made me wonder about any support available to kind of go back and get that level of feedback. For example, I think particularly if there's notice that a position might be eliminated, a representative position might be eliminated. So my head's going more into the process with the milestones and how we would create the right kind of process for it, but it doesn't need to get that level of detail for a report like this going into the legislature.
Let's see. So I guess, again, the outline, the general outline and timeline is crafted in the way to, again, determine the purpose and value, then given that purpose, and then what we know about best practices from other states or other examples, which type of board would be best suited. Then from that, determine the composition of the board objectively, and actually may not be specifically going back and forth to every single currently representative group, because we have to determine, is that better suited as an advisory board or advisory group as under the board, or actually board members, right? That's that tricky. It's going to be very difficult work, but remember, I asked anybody who wants to join us, they'll be welcome. Anyone is welcome to join the subcommittee as we have these conversations throughout the year. And then again, once we determine the type of board, then it's the size. And then ultimately the composition, who would be in those particular seats. Yeah.
And it is basically what we've been asked to do by the legislature. It's also the issue that was raised 2 years ago when we were exploring the application for that federal grant around government organizations. So I think it's an issue that has historical conversations, and it's going to take a lot of serious deliberation and conversation here at the board level once some recommendations are going to be made by the subcommittee.
And that big heavy lift for the board, it will actually come in April or May. Because it actually may take a while. Once we craft that initial backbone and make a recommendation, then the board and its all its members will have to agree. Well, not all, I guess a majority will have to agree.
I think too, not highlighted in here are some other key issues that we're going to have to look at around things like conflict of interest and membership on the board, not only in terms of who sits on the board, but also the ability of board members, board representation to take advantage of opportunities for their own agencies because of potential conflicts of interest. So there are some real conversations that have to be had around who can sit here and really do the business of the board without impinging their own successful efforts or limiting them, but also ensuring that there isn't undue potential influence among members on the board by virtue of positions held that they represent. There are some serious conversations to be had here.
Mhm.
Are there any other observations or comments from that? All right, we'll move to take a vote on the SCR 34 report. The motion was to accept the draft report to the legislature, including the timeline for the 2023 year. Justina?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Leilani?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Nay?
Aye.
I vote aye. Napua?
Aye.
Aye is left. It's not here. Melody?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion has been approved as presented. All right, we'll move to, thank you.
Bob, I want to make one. Want to make one comment. I will include in the final version of the report that this was reviewed by and approved. The report was approved by the Early Learning Board today. So that'll be a small statement in the actual report. And then thank you, Jordana, for helping us out. And I will need your help again to actually submit the report to the legislature. Thank you.
Maybe we should put that in the minutes too.
What's that?
And Matt, once you have the final report, would you send it to me so that I can send it to
Yes,
the appropriate people at the legislature?
absolutely.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. The other subcommittee that has a report to present today is the Workforce Equity Subcommittee around early childhood workforce principles. And Justina, would you lead us through that conversation, please?
Will do. Aloha, everyone. This should be familiar to you because we're picking up from a conversation that we had in November with one of our second agenda items from the Workforce Equity Subcommittee. So today we're actually delaying the action on this piece until January because we wanted to give everyone enough time to really digest the potential policy statement that we're proposing for today. And I'll be presenting, but also have excellent backup with Terry Locke, who I may ask to chime in at a few points. So what we're looking at, and actually, Kevin, if you don't mind sharing the screen, you all received a PDF version of the memo that was about adopting an early learning board policy statement about workforce principles. And this is kind of in purview of our subcommittee looking at the ways that our workforce can be supported. So a little bit of background, we talked some about it last week. Oop, and I lost my version of it. Let me just pull that up. So we talked last month about the background of the power to the profession that's both happened nationally, but I wanted to kind of also refocus us and share that one of the reasons that this policy statement came about is it's in support of work that the subcommittee has been looking at. So the first piece is that the power to the profession framework has been utilized and acknowledged as part of the quality workforce development supports, SIP, as we like to affectionately call our strategic implementation plans. And then the other part of that is all of that lifts up into the bigger report that we did with the first PDG grant, developing the Hawaii's early childhood state plan. So those documents do reference the pieces of the power to the profession unifying framework for early childhood education professionals. And really, the band that we're looking at is the professionals that are focused, because that's the work that's been done right now. It's the professionals that are in the early learning and early education space of the work. So then, because it's a bit newer to think about our early learning board, it was just in 2018 we really shifted in earnest into being a governing board. I added to this memo, and we discussed as a subcommittee, what are some of the benefits of actually adopting a policy statement? What are some of the ways that this policy statement could be utilized? So there's a list, Kevin, if you scroll down to the second page, is at the top to kind of show for our full early learning board. Policy statements can serve as in a variety of ways. One is that they help to clarify both positions and priorities for boards or for commissions. They can help direct or recommend to EOEL staff about time, funds, resources. And then similar to the policy framework that I know we'll talk about next, Bob, it helps to serve as guiding principles for both EOEL and ELB to consider when determining certain supports for projects, initiatives, or legislation. And it serves as a communications tool for the broader public on important pieces that make up our task and our key directive as the executive or as the early learning board. So I wanted to share that as kind of like the why would we set up ourselves to have a policy statement. And then if you're able to, Kevin, the other thing I wanted to flip to was an example of right now, the Hawaii Board of Education, they have been, they have a lot of board policy statements. And I wanted to flip to their website if possible, just to kind of show what this looks like. I understand that the link in the memo may not have worked correctly, so you may not have been able to look at this initially. But on their board policy, I don't know if you're able to get it open. I don't see it up yet, but if it comes up, so the Board of Education actually categorizes their board policies in a bunch of different categories. You can see there it starts with things like student success, and there's a series of policy statements that are under that, including things like what do students need to support for supporting effective learning. And I wanted to give this as an example, not to say that we would do something exactly like this, but this is a way that a board has organized themselves and adopted policy statements, some that are statutorily required because they're the Board of Education, but other policies may be because they see the need to adopt them and help clarify their position. So that's available if folks want to get a sense of what this looks like from another Hawaii board. And then and sorry to make you do so much flipping, but Kevin, if you could flip back to the actual document where we have the policy statement, it's on the second page of the memo. So our subcommittee worked on this, and we also heard, we also were able in the previewing over time of the work that we've been doing, even at last meeting when we got some feedback from other board members. We took those into consideration and we came up with this policy statement. So it's tentatively called just 1-101 relating to supports for on-track development, care, and learning. The core of this really is about the way we support our workforce, knowing that that's one of the ways that really cascades into the impact that we're hoping to see for our children and families. So the top line is kind of a broad statement about what we hope to see, that every keiki statement beginning at birth, that's the broad statement. And then it gets into the three things that are more specific about what we're saying EOEL shall do. And we really scoured through the Powers of the Profession unifying framework to see what was applicable to us in Hawaii, given some of the resources, some of the current work underway that was around supporting the workforce, like our recent RAND study, the work that's being led through UH with many partners on looking at both the professional pathways for people into the field, as well as what we had already mentioned, the compensation piece. So we focused our energy there. We actually had a few items, one other item that we put on the cutting room floor because we said, not ready for that yet. So that's how we landed with number 1 and number 2 of the things we felt like EOEL could be supportive of in its work now. So first statement there is around supporting early childhood professional preparation programs with funding and other resources, and obtaining and maintaining early childhood professional standards as they apply to the different early care and learning settings in Hawaii. And then the second does relate to compensation. So promoting increases in workforce compensation. And an important part of that statement is saying compensation will not be differentiated on the basis of ages of children served. And that's the goal that we're striving towards long term. One thing to note we felt like it was a real asset to build on is within our public pre-K program, we've actually been able to achieve pay parity with our K-12 educators. So there's something to kind of build on with that concept and idea. So I'll pause there, and because we're not voting on this today, we're actually going to defer the action on it until January. We don't need to make a motion. But before I open it up to any questions, I wanted to ask Dr. Terry Locke, is there anything that you wanted to add or emphasize that I might have missed?
Justina, you did a great job. And I don't think you missed anything, but I just want to add that, as Justina mentioned, there is work already ongoing through that we're doing through the ECE3 project regarding aligning courses, field experiences with national professional standards and competencies for early childhood educators. So, but yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Thanks, Justina.
Thank you. And so with that, Bob, is it okay to turn it open to discussion, or how do you want to handle this next section?
I see a question from Megan.
Go ahead, Megan.
Sorry, I have to unmute. Thanks. Thanks so much for that presentation and the work of this committee. I just, as a provider, I have a question about number 1, the first item, which is supporting early childhood professional preparation. Does that, and Terry may have just answered this a little bit, but does that assume that the qualifications for early childhood educators are just going to remain the same, or does this work or item maybe include looking at other ways of getting professionals qualified? How all-encompassing is that first point?
So Megan, can I answer that, Justina? I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Megan, we are, in higher education. So when we're talking about professional preparation programs, it includes our universities, community colleges, and the four-year universities in terms of what we're doing to support our our workforce that's moving through our pipeline, our pathways. As far as the qualifications, I think that is one of the things in the, if you're here in the last meeting, we talked about that there in the unifying framework, there is an alignment to what we're calling educator 1, 2, and 3. And this is just first iteration or first edition of looking at the entire profession. And that we're trying to align our coursework to those particular educator 1, 2, and 3. And the way it's defined as educator 1 is one would be obtaining a CDA, or like a CDA, 120 hours of training. And then educator 2 would be an associate degree, and educator 3 would be a bachelor's degree. So it doesn't necessarily change the DHS licensing at this point. If you're asking about that, it changes how we kind of align the work we're doing and the leveling we're doing from the community college to the bachelor's degree and even to our master's degree.
Yeah, and the one other piece I'd add, Megan, is in our subcommittee, we also talked about the piece around that we're actually trying to have those pieces apply to the various settings, right? So it might mean, actually there's two things that we kind of said, oh, these kind of fit in here and they're underway or being experimented with in Hawaii. One being the partnership that's between employer and one of our community colleges to look at apprenticeship models as like a pathway that helps with recognition and building those standards and competencies along the way. And then the other piece, there was one other example that I was thinking of in that, that we're looking at, I know one of the things through the project that Terry is helping to lead is looking at how can we give recognition for prior knowledge, prior experience in the field. And so there's some piloting that's going to begin around that as well. Hopefully that answers your question, that it's meant to have encompassment of the sectors that are part of our early childhood system.
Yeah, I do want to add that, add to what Justina mentioned. So the project is, aside from aligning our work, our courses and field experiences to these national standards, it's also to really better support the folks starting in the pathway and then along the pathway getting degrees. And so through these innovative ways.
I want to ask a question as well. Megan, did you get your question answered?
I think so, yeah. I have so many questions, but I don't want to take up too much time in this meeting. So yeah, thank you. It's very interesting.
I realize this is aligned with power as a profession in the unifying framework. In number 1, where it says different early care and learning settings in Hawaii, is it possible that there would be the flexibility to either have different items than those that are included in power to the profession with the Hawaii codicil, or does it have to be aligned strictly with the NAEYC power to the profession proposal?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the reasons, so Terry talked a little bit about how the professional preparation programs, and keep in mind it's not that the standards that the educators are required, it's the programs that are training our excellent teachers who are going to be out in the field or educators in different settings. We talk, or one of the reasons it's actually labeled as being early childhood professional standards is because those are in the process of getting revised right now. So taking what we have in Hawaii previous work and kind of looking at them, melding them, but those aren't newly adopted yet, if you will. So we don't have anything that's specific that we're pointing towards. But the goal is that there's alignment as much as it applies to the settings, the different settings here in Hawaii. And there might need to be some flexibility in that too, based on the different settings. Like we just had the conversation about the Hawaiian language medium programs.
Okay, thank you. Mel, I see you have a comment.
Yes, just sitting on the committee. I know trying to make it broad enough to capture everything that we've just been talking about right now, including, and this hasn't been brought up, but also including not just credit bearing, but clock hour, preparation programs, trainings, say for example, that is provided by Patch or through Patch or any other training organization. So really trying to capture all the facets of professional preparation that lead toward CDA, ECE certification, ITC certification, or a degree.
Okay.
I think that was the intent.
Thank you, Mel. Are there any other comments or questions?
And I think just before we close out, the intention with having this discussion now is surfacing if there's anything that still you have questions about or want clarity before we come back together in January to potentially take action on it. This is also meant that if you have this drafted version now, so if you want to take it back to your constituency group or any stakeholders that you think might be important to review something like this, you have the time to do it. Thank you
to Justin and to you and the committee for bringing this forward. It will be on the January agenda. Also wanted to add, just for those who are not aware, that the whole issue of policies with regard to the Early Learning Board is one the governance committee has been tasked with and was working on prior to the pandemic, with the intent to get to what you were talking about in terms of the Board of Education type of presentation on the website, Justina. We were in the process of really trying to categorize, collect, and capture actually the policies that have come about since the initiation of the board. So that's a project that needs to be revitalized, and probably once we get through the major issue we have to deal with this year, the governance committee has put this on the back burner, but we'll pick it up again. So thank you for urging us to go in that direction. Mari has indicated that she has a quick question. Mari?
Yes. For the professional preparation, this is not directly to that, but I just want you to think, because today is a thinking day, seems like, once we became physician or the nurses too, they have some kind of continuing education, right? And then I think you have something like that as well, because professional preparation is also a process. It's not like you done the degree and then you did certain hours and you were in the classroom and you are done. I think every class, every year, the kids come, different composition and different characters. And then I think there are experience that is going to teach you too. So those things are also considered to kind of get a certain amount to renew, or those people who renewed. Well, we have no choice, but those people for the education, because the population is way bigger than ours. If there are some requirements, or if there's no requirements, but if you do certain things, it's going to be recognized. I think that may be also encouraging too.
Thanks for sharing that, Mari. I think that would be a little bit beyond what this policy statement is addressing right now, because it takes us more into it's not an ongoing piece that this is meant. Although right now we do have some of those requirements. So for example, Department of Human Services does require a certain number of hours for being up on some of your education, so you can take different kinds of trainings to fulfill those requirements. And so I think those are all part of us building the system, but not inclusive in this policy statement right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions before we move on to the next item? I don't see anything, Justina. Thank you. And we will assure it's on the agenda for the next meeting. Next item on the agenda is a leadership update. We need to approve the revised legislative policy framework priorities. Kevin, I'm the only one who didn't ask you to be ready to call that up. Can you call that document up? This is the proverbial, you tell everybody else, don't forget to, and then you don't do. It's, yeah, the framework of policy priorities. It was sent with the mailing. It may say legislative session, I'm not sure.
Was it sent to the email that you sent? Okay. Is it on the website?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My apologies to you both. Basically, this is to approve the full document and to inform the legislative testimonies that we're going to give this year. I don't want to go over each of the items. I just want you to have it in front of you to see what the categories are. The first one has to do with health, safety, and well-being. We had two additions in our October meeting that have been included in this one. The second was building block 2, family partnerships. That remained the same from the very beginning. Building block 3, the early learning, we added one document and one item. The first bullet, expand access and opportunity to quality early learning and care, including infant and toddlers in both the public and private sector. And then in state plan building block 4, the workforce, last week, the board approved 2 items. The last 2 bullets, improving compensation and providing unique consideration and support to ensure retention and recruitment for Hawaiian language medium early learning providers. Building block 5 stayed the same. We had one general guideline we had been asked to include for testimony, which was to consider the potential impact of any testimony on Hawaii medium education. So I'm proposing that the board approve the framework of policy priorities for the 2023 legislative session as presented in this document. Is there a second?
This is Justina. I second the motion.
Thank you, Justina. The motion has been made and seconded to approve the framework of policy priorities. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote to approve. Justina?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Okay, Iolani?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
May?
Aye.
I approve. Napua,
Aye.
Mari,
Aye.
Melody?
Aye.
The motion has been approved as presented. Thank you very much. This will guide our efforts as we move into the legislative session. So we now move to another opportunity for public comment. Again, the 2-minute time restriction and only for items related to those included on the agenda. Is there any public comment? I don't see anything in the chat. Justin, do you see anything? Okay. There appear to be no public comments, and we will now move to item 7, member updates. Other member updates?
Bob, I have 2 updates.
Okay.
This is Matt. First update, I forgot previously to remind everyone that the ELB Governance Subcommittee will be meeting on Friday, December 16th from 12:30 to 1:30. Everyone is welcome to attend. We will be starting our action plan, discussing the action plan, and then distributing the necessary acts and HRS to review for our work in January. Second update is my Department of Health update. COVID is still around. In our youngest kids, RSV, and also in our oldest folks who have lung or other respiratory compromise issues, RSV is currently an issue. On the continent, flu, it's a huge uptick in flu. If folks don't know, it takes about 2 months for that same uptick to hit Hawaii. So that big update, the big uptick in actual influenza usually happens after January, so beginning mid-January. And that's because everybody goes and visits for the holidays, brings it back to Hawaii with them. Again, recommend flu shots. There's also the, if you've not received your bivalent booster for COVID, unfortunately, there's no vaccine for our youngest kids for RSV. Most of you in your life have actually already had RSV. For older kids, it's fairly self-limiting. It's managing symptoms at home. But for the youngest kids, it can be serious. So obviously, keep an eye on the young kiddos and also the older adults who may be having cold and/or flu-like symptoms, and seek necessary medical assistance when you deem that it's necessary. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Ben, I'm sorry. Thank you, Matt. I don't know which category I fit in there, so I will begin to wear masks again, I think. Ben, you said you had an update?
Yeah, more of a, I forgot to mention something when we talked about the roadmap when I did the Mahalo. I forgot to add Mapua from KS was also part of the subcommittee, and Lane, big shout out to Lane because he managed to put all of our thoughts down on paper. So I wanted to make sure we give a shout out to Lane. So I apologize. You guys are in person, so I didn't see your name on the screen. I apologize, Lane and Napua.
Thank you, Ben. I see no other updates in the chat. Is that correct? Okay, well, let me review the outcomes of this meeting. The first one is we approved the Act 46-210 roadmap report, specifically the 4 action items in response to SCR 217. Secondly, we approved the EOEL Director Evaluation Priorities for the 2022-23 year. Third, we accepted the draft report to the legislature, including the timeline with regard to FCR 34 and board composition. In January, we will be asked to approve policy 1101 relating to supports of on-track development, care, and learning. And we also approved today the framework of policy priorities, the 2023 legislation. So not a bad way to end our end of the year meeting with a fair amount accomplished. I want to thank everyone for their hard work and for their continued support and for the extra work that's been required to arrive at this particular point. It's all much appreciated since it's volunteer time on everyone's part. Carrie is not here today to provide us with a good word. So I'm going to give you the gift of a little bit of extra time today by ending the meeting early. Thanking you for all that you do for young children and for the support of the EOEL and the Early Learning Board. Wishing you a holiday season filled with hope, good cheer, high spirits, and a new year of good health and forward-looking on behalf of all the keiki in Hawaii. They are our responsibility. So aloha to everyone and mahalo. Meeting is adjourned.